come from various detergents, just like, laundry detergent, hand soap, all those contain phosphates. And we were able to detect those inside the cave. And those we were able to tie directly to leaks in the various sewage lines in the park. We also detected things like different metal contaminations, things like zinc and aluminum, things that you would not normally find in water and inside a cave, particularly 750 feet underground. These are generally indicators of parking lot runoff. And if you think about it, especially if you have like an older car, that sits on the driveway, you get that little puddle of fluids and things like that on your driveway, multiply that times thousands of visitors a year. And those parking lots sit right on top of Carlsbad Cavern. And when it rains, all that stuff washes off. The only place for the water to go is straight down, and unfortunately Carlsbad Cavern is directly below that. Now, the contaminants that we were seeing inside the cave are still, well below like EPA drinking water standards, but they're above what you would normally see, as natural background levels. So even though it doesn't make the water unsafe to drink, not that people would wander around the cave drinking the cave water, but we still are concerned about the potential effects of that contamination on native cave life.
Explain that a little bit. What is the biggest concern? So we have a little zinc and a little oil or whatever the contaminants are.
Yeah, probably the first thing that would be impacted are the microbes inside the cave. There's in all of the fractures and all of the rock inside the cave itself, there are microbes, and all microbes require some kind of water to survive as part of their life cycle. Well, you start throwing these weird chemicals in the mix. Microbes are super sensitive to, changes in their chemical environment. So, those would be the first things that are impacted.
Does it change the formation of the caves?
Any change in water chemistry will change sort of how the decorations in the cave are forming. Part of the problem is these contaminants actually get incorporated into the rock as the water moves down into the cave. It loses the carbon dioxide, starts forming all the pretties that you see. Well, those chemicals are actually being incorporated into them, and things like zinc, aluminum, all these other metals can actually discolor the cave formations. The worst case scenario is we actually have some sort of catastrophe in one of the parking lots, like a vehicle fire. That water and the foam and all that used to fight one of those fires would actually be flushed fairly quickly into the cave. It's we don't have any soil, so you can't scoop up the soil and just haul it off in a truck. I mean,
quickly get something from above, contaminate down below. Hold that thought. Sorry, it's coming in.
From a different study that we did, actually, we actually put dye over the cave and let it flow down naturally. We actually measured how long it takes from water to get into the cave. The soonest that it got into the cave was actually up near the entrance area. It took about 6 weeks, and that was to actually get through only about 60 feet of rock. So it's extremely variable. It depends on the amount of fractures and the amount of water that's actually pushing it through. But you're looking at contamination that takes anywhere between 6 weeks and up to years to actually get down into the cave. Now, the important part of that is that means that even once we remove infrastructure, that means there's going to be a lot of those contaminants still kind of resident in the system. So you're probably actually looking at, tens of years before all of the contaminants, that are put in the cave over the last 100 years finally work their way all the way through, and you're looking at basically uncontaminated water being restored back into the system.
Is that how long we think it's been? About 100 years, the contamination? I mean, we've had parking lots and people, and is that what it's been?
Yeah, the majority of the contamination has probably been more recent. Once we paved the parking lots, you concentrate the flow into smaller areas so that the paths, the little fractures in the rock, the cracks in the rock that the contaminants have flown through, basically have been completely saturated. They don't have any way of absorbing any more contamination, so now it just goes straight through.
How long has that been going on, do you think?
I'm not sure when the parking lots, yeah, they were definitely paved by the 40s. Very, very early on, the parking lots were more gravel. So you kind of spread the contamination out. You at least gave the soil microbes a little bit of time to try to break down some of that material. But now that we've removed, particularly the Batcave Draw parking lot, We've taken the pavement out of there. We don't allow parking down there other than just sort of some limited handicap parking for the bat flight. Two things are the result of that is, one, we've restored more natural infiltration through that whole area, because basically once you put pavement on top, the water is not being spread out and coming down into the cave, and that water is vital not only for the cave life but to make the pretty formations. So we've restored a pretty significant chunk of water to naturally flow into the cave, and by removing those parking lots, we've also removed a major source of contamination that's right over the main part of the cave.
So microbes, discoloration of formations, anything else that was major that you guys see in effect?
Well,
Those are the two majors?
Those are the two majors from a sort of a natural perspective.
Okay.
When you're looking at some of the catastrophic stuff, like the vehicle fires, there are fuel tanks up above the cave, to run the emergency generator, to run the housing units, the heating and stuff like that. If there was a major leak of some of those, like the big diesel tank, that contamination coming into the cave over a long period of time, you're actually looking at the potential, of that kind of contamination closing the cave for a time. Because obviously if you've got hydrocarbons down inside the cave where the fumes are above, breathing standards, even though we've got good air exchange in the cave, you could potentially affect visitation.